everybody knows culture takes years. And I go, no. And they go, what do you mean? And I go, well, it's already changing. It starts right here. And I said, you know what I'm going to start looking for? And they said, what? And I said, smiling. They said smiling. Like, what's that got to do with EBITDA?
I've never met a PE guy who cared about the smiles. Welcome to the Culture Work Podcast. I'm Chester Elton. I'm here with my dear friend and co-author, Adrian Gostick. And this is the show where we talk to the thinkers, the movers, the shakers, the people that are making a difference in business and in culture. Boy, does today's guest fit that bill, huh? Darcy Verhun is the CEO of Canada Diagnostic Centers. He's also the author of a book that we got to contribute to that's called The Freedom of Constraints. And we'll get to that in a little while. Now, he's led transformational growth in his firm by applying coaching principles. He's one of the members of the 100 coaches of Marshall Goldsmith with us. He also is a believer in strategic clarity and servant leadership. Welcome to the show, Darcy.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. We've known Darcy for a long time, haven't we, Adrian? He's one of our dear friends. We can honestly say that. And just do we value your friendship? We just value your leadership. You know, you've been through some really interesting times, you know. You've gone through growth, you've gone through a pandemic, you've gone through crisis, and you've not just done it with one company, you've now done it with two. And one of the reasons we really want to talk to you about that. So unpack your leadership playbook, because the two industries that you were in are very different, you know, from FYI doctors to CDC, with very different challenges. And yet your leadership style translated really well. So again, just unpack your playbook for us. What is it that you come in and do that is so effective?
Well, yeah, great question. Not sure that I've thought about it that way, but I could think about it. There are a couple things that I really pay attention to, and first and foremost is the patient or customer, and ensuring that everyone's focused on the people that you serve is one. And then number two, being able to help people on our team, like, understand that what is the most important thing to focus in on, so that I can set the proper expectation and people know when they've done good. People talk about KPIs and things like that, and we have something we call the Clinic Excellence Index. And it really started with the question of what does good look like? And what we want to do is not so much hold people accountable. Like, we want people to feel responsible to be able to, excel. And the concept of what good looks like, and the way to measure it with a Clinic Excellence Index, is to actually catch people doing good, as opposed to looking for opportunities to, what did you do wrong, or you need to be accountable to achieve X. It's how do we know what good is, so that we can feed it.
And we work a lot in healthcare as well, and there's this penchant for perfectionism in healthcare because people's lives are at stake. And so we tend to, you're right, look for the negative. And I love what you're doing there is, let's start from the positive.
Well, you've hit on something else, and I see it especially now in diagnostic imaging, is the that it's not so much perfectionism, but it's the concept of quality.
Mm.
And oftentimes, and I'm not a doctor, but oftentimes there's this like over indexing on quality. And the thinking is that quality takes more time. And so people talk about balance, and I spent a lot of my life, not just in business, but thinking about balance, even from a sports perspective. And I don't believe balance is a trade-off. I actually believe that if you're balanced, it's like a golf swing. You're in balance. It looks effortless. And when you hit the ball, it goes a mile. And so to me, the quality it's not something as a trade-off. And so what I've been trying to do right now is really focus in on what really matters most. And that's access to care.
And by the way, Darcy is a former, very high-level skier in Canada, and
We actually worked together on the same ski hill when we were young lads. And I was one of the lift operators. He was one of the fancy, schmancy ski instructors. But that's beside the point. Yeah,
Well, and to your point, though, balance in skiing. I mean, you understand
exactly.
that as well.
Exactly.
You know, when you're in the zone and you're balanced, you know, the course is effortless.
And I want to
100%.
get into something, Darcy. You wrote this book called "The Freedom of Constraints." I must admit, it's a tough concept for people to first understand, but when they do, they really get excited about it. Now, you champion the idea that it's clarity through constraint, but we live in a world where we all want more, right? More freedom. Leaders want more responsibility, more projects, more ownership. But you talk about the power of focus. So help us understand this concept of how constraints can actually unlock freedom.
There's a whole bunch there in what you said, and I believe that constraints actually create freedom. It builds more, and you think about like you're on a bridge across the the river, and you don't have any guardrails, and like and you make a mistake, you shoot off and you hurt yourself. The guardrails provide like some certainty and safety and allow you freedom. That makes sense because you're less worried about the risk of making a mistake. So I think you can unpack it that way. I also well, in the book, we were blessed with 29 people sharing their perspective on constraints and how they create freedom. But what the book does is it shows how different people have responded when they had no choice. And I'm not sure if you heard of the paradox of choice, but if you have too much, you're paralyzed and you don't actually do anything. And so I think what you see when you look at the stories and lessons that the authors have shared, you're going to see that what people have done when they've had no choice, it's resulted in something more powerful than if they had an abundance of choice or abundance of money.
I can't remember the author who was it, but he wrote about going in and buying jeans. He says, I need some jeans. And they said, right. They said, okay, what do you want? And there was 40 types. He goes, I want jeans. There's one type. And no, not anymore. And he left and he felt, did I make the right choice? And he was second guessing himself, right?
Yeah.
I love his line. He said, before you had all this and there were just jeans, show me those ones. Darcy, you talk about your 65, which I think is really interesting. So how do you keep leaders focused and what's the 65?
What's interesting, going back, I was advising the art sector, and they were struggling in Canada because government funding had been cut back. And this one guy named Tom McCabe, loved the arts, was a banker, and the theater company that he loved going to was struggling, and he just retired as a banker. And he said, you know what, like I know about business, but I don't know about art. And he said, I'd love to help out because I want to see the theater thrive. And Tom started to unpack things, and like the art, you can't put a price on art. And if you gave a theater company unlimited money, they would spend it.
Sure.
And because to build it, to create the art. Well, Tom discovered something that I thought was really profound and interesting. When he looked at everything, he discovered that if he sold 65% of the season's ticket sales, that enabled him sufficient fund to break even. Okay, so 65% says and then he discovered something else, that if you fill the house 65% season ticket sales, the same day sales would fill up most of the rest of the house. And if you had a packed house, you know what happens with a packed house? The art is better. I didn't know this. Like I always thought, you're watching the theater. Well, you're not watching the theater. The audience is part of it. And so it was really it was interesting because he focused on the 65%, and then it made everything better. And then if you meet the guy on Stephen Avenue is a place where people walk in Calgary. If you meet him, he'll open up a suit coat and he'd pull out a piece of paper. It's got columns with people's names and phone numbers, and there's a line. The line's at 65. He'll look at the sheet and he'll say, "Oh, Chester, I don't see your name on here. What's your cell phone again, Chester?" And he'll write it down. He says, "I'll have my office phone you to sign you up." And it's relentless, and everyone knows that the single thing is 65% season's ticket sales, and once they get that, everything is good.
And you focus like a laser beam. I love that. It's like you say, what's the one big thing? Well, for him, the one big thing is 65.
65. And you talk about this too, because you talk about and as Chester and I do interviews with employee groups, they say, I got 30 priorities. I got so many priorities, I don't know what's what. And I've heard this over and over again, where somebody will say, I just wish my boss would sit down with me on a Monday morning and help me map out my week. Let me know what has to get done, what can fall off the sled if it has to. So what do you say to leaders that work for you and their people are overwhelmed with priorities?
What you're describing feels like Groundhog Day for me. My prior company, when I started, it had 121 projects, and it had been in business 5 years, and not a single project had ever been done. And then people wondered why, why we weren't achieving what we wanted to. But in that company, we narrowed it to 11, and we got focus. In my current instance, I attended the first senior leadership team meeting, and it was 3 hours long. And coming out of the meeting, we had 12 pages single spaced of the notes, and we had 42 to-dos and 29 questions that were to-dos. And that's from a bi-weekly meeting. So you just think about that. 7 people own 80 plus things every 2 weeks that are net new. How do you ever achieve anything? So here, what we've done is we narrowed the focus. So it's, Canada Diagnostic Centers, so CDC. So culture is the first C. Culture. D is deliver care, because we're all about creating access. And then C, I still can't think of what the right word is. I call it cost excellence, but it really means operations effectiveness. So I try to ignore it as a C, and I call it operational effectiveness. But CDC, and that's all. So whenever we're trying to make a hard choice, I say stand back. Does what we want to do, does it impact culture? Does it impact our ability to provide access to care, deliver care, or does it help us be operational effectiveness? And if it doesn't do 2 of the 3, well, why? And it's been really effective, and it's actually made some hard people choices easier, because you stand back and say, you know what, this is the right thing to do, because if we keep doing what we're doing, it's going to have a negative impact on culture. It's not going to enhance our ability to deliver care. So we're making the wrong decision. So it's really helped us narrow our focus. And it also makes it something you can't debate, because sometimes people think, well, we call it home office, not corporate office, but all the home office team thinks about is, making money. Well, actually, no, we don't. We're solely focused on this concept of solving the crisis of access to care. And if you think CDC, those are the 3 things, and that's it. There's nothing more. And when we get into a big debate at the board level, and I go, well, time out, guys. Your lips are moving, but I'm not hearing anything about culture or about increasing access to care. People go, oh yeah. It causes people to stand back for a second, and it just grounds us.
It reminds me so much, and Adrian, you'll resound to this. It was Texas Roadhouse, right? When Ken Taylor said, it's legendary service, legendary food.
Yeah.
The story I love is they have all the MBAs come in and wanted to change everything and put it in diversity and the environment and whatever. Do whatever you want, but it's got to be 4 words, and 2 of those words have to be legendary.
Smile.
So to your point, when your board starts to stray, you go, okay, wait, it's CDC. Remember, guys?
So on that, I start with the company, and we need to make some improvements and things like that. And I go to Montreal to meet with the private equity, money people,
Right.
and they got big expectations and whatnot, and they say, well, culture certainly is you say CDC, culture's that's going to take years. And I go, no, actually it's not. And they go, no, no, everybody knows culture takes years. And I go, no. And they go, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, it's already changing. And they kind of stand back, and I say, well, it starts right here. It started yesterday, and people are watching me, and I'm going to model the behavior I want to see, and I'm going to reinforce that behavior. And I said, you know what I'm going to start looking for? And they said, what? And I said, smiling. Or I said, smiling. And they said, smiling. Like, what's that got to do with EBITDA?
I'd never met a P guy who cared about the smiles. Yeah.
Yeah, I said, well, you know what? We're going to start with a smile, and you know what? It's contagious. And just think about it. You go into I'm not sure what it's like in your environment, but I can tell you what I've experienced most of my life. When I go into a doctor's office, it's called reception, and typically there's a high bar, and somebody's behind the bar, typing away. They know you're there. They know you're there, but they don't acknowledge you. And so what I've signaled to our team here is that we want to have a care that's worthy of remark, that it's remarkable. And I stole that concept from Seth Godin, the remarkable concept. And so I've said, look, like when somebody walks into a CDC clinic, like our goal is, and this is catching them doing good, okay? We're actually measuring this in the Clinic Excellence Index, is were people warmly greeted with a smile, and it's contagious. It sets the stage for everything. And, when people come in to see us, their physician has diagnosed something, and they think that they've got a problem. Like maybe they've got cancer, there's some serious things. So, so we've got to be different because people are coming in deeply concerned about their health. So I've asked for a warm greeting and smile, and then just for fun, I've said to people, if you're not happy with me or what I'm doing, you know what you do. When I walk in, you stand up and smile. I will keel over and die on the spot. Because no one does that. And it's different. And if you connect with people on a different level, everything is different. Like everything is different, and it permeates the entire place. And so I'm super excited. So I've been fortunate that it seems to be sticking, and people notice when it happens, and we pay attention to that.
Excellent. That's a perfect way into our next segment. We talk about from boss to coach, changing that playbook. And you had a lot of experience in your previous job with coaching and so on. Here's the thing, though. You've got a lot of command and control cultures, right? And then you shift to a coaching leadership. It's not easy because they've been doing it for a long time, especially like legacy industries or even family, businesses. But you've done it. So in this segment, we want to understand how you rewired team leadership. You've already talked a little bit about it. Watch me. This is the behavior I want. And what lessons can other executives draw from this playbook to go from boss to coach?
Oh boy. There's a bunch of things there. I start with talking about it at the senior level, and build some materials to be able to ask people what's the best leader they've ever experienced,
right?
What's the worst, what's the difference? And then even I've created something with 2 columns, boss and coach, to try to define a spectrum. And we talk about where do you sit on the spectrum? What do you think the people you lead respond well to? And it's what one of our leaders here, we just had these things we called employee connect events instead of town halls. We just had one, and I did a workshop on coaching, and she left and said, boy, I realized, I thought I was engaging with a team, and I really wasn't. So I took away that I need to connect with them in a different way rather than tell. I need to talk about what we're trying to achieve and explore how we might get there. because she said maybe I don't know the answer. Maybe there's something better. Maybe them coming up with the idea would make them more committed, than just being told what to do. So people see it and then they talk about it, and it makes a difference.
I can see coaching fitting with culture. That makes a lot of sense. But maybe some of the more, financially minded folks may say, how does this fit with us delivering care or cost excellence, as you said? How do we tie this to the bottom line, this coaching culture?
Okay. From a PE perspective, the outcome is EBITDA. Like, how do we get that outcome? And in our context, it's the Clinic Excellence Index. And that's what we said as, this is what good looks like. And it allows us to be clear on what the expectations are, of our colleagues. So then we can coach to something, so what is the behavior we want to see? And, and then we can coach to that. The outcome are the things that the PE firm takes, that, pays attention to and whatnot. But if we've got the right expectations for our team, that's all going to ladder up to achieve the ultimate outcome.
Coach to something. And I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that's easiest to forget and is I think it's one of the most important parts of coaching is follow-up. So it's follow-up so that you notice when people have made a change, even if it's small, so you encourage them to continue along the path, or follow-up to see if we need to do a reset. Is there something different? And following up, not having the answer, following up to ask, well, because how I think about something's not like how I think what the solution is might not work for somebody else. And so it's really important that, almost like when, at the start, when I talked about the importance of putting ourselves in our patients' or customers' shoes in terms of how we think about things, we have to do the same with your team. You have like what's going to work for them.
Right. Everybody's a little different. And a good coach knows that, right? Knows his player. I want to talk to you about, what are your habits and rituals that keeps you in that coaching mindset? I carry around little gratitude stones, got a little mantra to keep me in a gratitude mindset. What are you doing as a leader to keep yourself in that coaching mindset?
I like to put myself into the business. So I like to find ways where I'm present in the clinic, or I'm present in home office. And, I think there are three really simple but hard words that allow me to connect with my team. And the three words are, it's a question. It's, how are you? How are you? And then, because I'm not an extrovert, so it's hard for me to put myself out there. Like, I have to intentionally do it. And if I can find a way to get myself into a place where I'm present with the people that work on the floor in the clinic, and ask, how are you? And then what you got to do is you have to listen with every fiber of your being. No, and something else I've discovered is relish in the silence, because not everybody jumps in with an answer, or maybe it's something really quick, but if you can find a way where you just stay there.
I had a boss who had a 4-word greeting. What's wrong with you? So very similar, the you part. And isn't that interesting? Because you're now focusing on the person and developing that relationship before you jump into, hey, show me what you're doing, or where are the numbers? Where's my report? Excellent.
And often introverted bosses can be the best because they're listeners, like you, Darcy. I mean, you're a great boss because you do care. And some of us more introverted types, Chester has come out of his shell finally, after I've been working him with for years. He's finally coming out. Okay, let's take a, now we're just going to we're breaking here because we have a couple of questions. Now, this section is called the Culture Challenge, where we tackle real-world leadership dilemmas. Now, some that our guests are facing right now, and others that they may encounter. So we think about this as a little mini coaching lab, Darcy, where we unpack how culture challenges show up and how to navigate them with intention. So we've asked you to think of something that maybe you want to talk about and have us all brainstorm on. So Darcy, give us a question here that may stump the three of us.
Okay. We have 5 different brands across 4 different provinces, and a combination of urban and rural, and a different mix of modalities of care. So how do we create a model of patient care and connection that will scale and can span all of that difference?
Good question. My first strategy, well, you can't. Narrow it down to just one location in one city. It'll be a lot better out. This is the dilemma, right? Because you want to grow, and as you grow, rural is different than urban. You have language differences. In Canada, you've got everything in French as well. So, my take on that would be to make sure that your foundational values, and I think you've got that at CDC, with smiles. I mean, there are certain things that everybody gravitates towards, You say, do you want to be happy or do you want to be sad? Well, I want to be happy. So let's stick with smiles. I mean, that's an easy one. I think if you get the basics right, that transcends rural and urban, generationally even. And I love earlier in our discussion when you said, and it starts with the coach, which is your word for leader, better than boss, right?
Yeah.
As the coach comes in, are you modeling the right behaviors? And are you reinforcing those right behaviors? Hey, I saw what you did there with that smile. I'll never forget coaching up an executive, and I said, look, nobody likes to talk to you. You never smile. He says, well, what do you want me to do? I said, just want you to smile all day. He says, well, I don't know if I can. I said, well, that's your chance. And he texts me in the middle of the day. He says, people are so much. People want to be around me. And then my favorite thing, I think you're onto something with this smiling thing.
Yes, that's like you just came up with it. You fell up.
Yeah. Like it's revelation. Like, so, would that be helpful? I mean, does that resonate? That you stick to the real basic stuff. Don't get, oh, well, this is Northern Alberta as opposed to the middle of Manitoba, right? Would that work?
Yeah, I think that'd be quite helpful, actually. And Karate Kid popped in my mind when you said that, like wax on with like this.
Yeah.
This. Well, the basics, right? Like if you can find a way to create, like, to take joy from the simple things, from the basics, I think that could be quite helpful.
And I think too, you have a big decision to make overall. Are we a house of brands or are we a brand of house? Right? The Procter & Gamble's a house of brands, and that's okay. They run it really well. Tide operates very differently than other brands, and everybody's proud of who they are. But you have to give those brands a lot of autonomy to run how they do. In a branded house, we work with the University of Michigan's medical system, which changed to Michigan Medicine. Well, it doesn't matter if you're in rural Michigan or you're in downtown Detroit. You got to have the same goals and the same feel, even though it's a very different system. But you still want people to have a little autonomy, even in a branded house. And so that's one of the big decisions. So if you're going to allow people some autonomy, there's still, as Chester says, there has to be this thread of values that even though, one of our favorites is Texas Roadhouse, right, Jess? They have other brands. And they're all really customer focused. They have Bubba's, I think. Bubba's 33, I think. And they have another one.
Sports bar and Jaggers.
Yeah, sports bar, Jaggers, yeah. And so very different food, very, very different sort of music playing and vibe. But the theme of guest satisfaction runs through all of them, that value. So there's some sort of underlying thing that ties us all together as different brands, so that when everybody comes together, we feel like we're still one family, well, one team, if you will.
It's kind of the freedom of constraint. I'm thinking, to quote a friend of mine, the other thing I think, Darcy, and because you're different regionally, is for your coaches is to always assume positive intent. You know, that I think is a great coaching mantra is I'm going to come in and maybe not everybody is smiling, you know, and I don't know what they just came from. I'm going to assume that they showed up and they're going to try to do a good job. And then as I kind of coach them up, I'm not going to make the assumption that they're not buying into this. The word you use that I love, worthy of a remark, something remarkable, you know. I don't think they're buying in on that. But the idea, though, that I'm going to come in, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to assume positive intent, and I'm going to coach them up and figure it out. I love your question. How are you? Because, you know, they might say, listen, my son was just in a car accident. I'm beside myself. I don't know what to, you know. And you go, oh, well, that's a pretty good reason not to be smart now, you know. I love that principle in coaching where you say, no, I'm going to assume positive intent.
You know, you reminded me on one of my walk-arounds, I noticed someone sitting quite quietly, and I was going to walk right by her, and I just felt something, and I stopped, and I just said, "How are you?" And I just waited, and she kind of looked at me. She looked really upset, and I'm going, "What? Like, what's going on?" And she said, "You know, my favorite aunt passed away, you know, this morning." And I said, like, "Why are you here? You know, like, you know, like you should be with your family." And she says, "Oh no, you know, like I need to be here because I just got to take my mind off it."
Oh.
So I said, "Okay, you know, if there's something I can do," and just for whatever reason, and this is not I'm not trying to brag about what I did, but at the end of the day, I walked by and I just said, you know, are you like, you okay? And she said, "Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm really grateful to be here." So I said, "Okay, well, you know, you do whatever you need to do." And then the next day, partway through the day, she comes to my office and she says, "Thank you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "You know what, you showed me that you cared, you know," and like it's completely unexpected. And, you know, like I like it felt really good. That's all I can say. And I've got a completely different relationship with this person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the good coach, the follow-up. Well done. See,
Well,
you're doing it. You don't even realize you're doing it. So you took,
no,
hey, listen, we're going to go to the lightning round. Okay. This is the big wrap up here. So don't overthink it. You just, you know, the first thing that pops into your head, you know, Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, whatever it is, just let it fly. Okay. Here's the first question. What's the one leadership principle that hasn't ever failed you?
naming what I feel.
Naming what, a book or practice that changed the way you lead.
Like there are a million. I'll go with triggers.
From our friend Marshall Goldsmith.
Yeah, it's knowing your triggers. And this is kind of goes back to constraints, because like if you know your trigger and find a way to avoid it, like give yourself a constraint. I'm not gonna let that trigger hurt me.
And I loved how you didn't pick one of our books. That would have been too obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although people ask me, what's your favorite book? I say, I say page 157, How Career Constraints Can Build Stronger Employee Motivation by Adrian, Gostick, and Chesterfield. Hey, so last one, finish this sentence. A thriving culture is
A company that takes joy from doing the simple things well.
I love.
I love it. You're taking very complex things and you're boiling it down to simplicity so we can all understand. That's what I love what you do as a leader, Darcy. You've invited us in. We went through the pandemic with you and your team before, and we were honored to be invited in. You've invited us in to come speak at your organization, and now we're just so excited to see what you do with Canada Diagnostic Centers.
Well, you know what? You guys both have taught me from example, and I'm going to touch on one of the many. At one point during the pandemic, I had to furlough just over 92% of my team, and still find a way to provide eye care across Canada. And you know, and I'd been working 7 days a week, and like I swear to God, the day that like you guys phoned me up one day, and that particular day, I remember like I was having trouble not crying all day, and no, and you phoned me up together and said, we're thinking about you. I'm going like this has come out of the blue, and you said, is there anything we can do? And you said, we would love to connect with your team and talk about leading with gratitude. And you volunteered to do a session. You spent the first half hour talking about the concepts about leading with gratitude. And then you had 35, 40 minutes just with my team at a round table. And like the impact that you had on me, my leadership, like I can't even, and the company and the patients we care for across Canada, like you have no idea how big an impact you had on Canadians' health and me. And it's funny, the book Leading with Gratitude, like I'm forever grateful to both of you.
Well, what perfect way.
Thanks.
Thank you, Darcy. You're one of our dear friends. You're one of our leadership heroes. We're delighted to have you on the podcast. And we're delighted for all of you that listened in and tuned in. We'll see you again in the next episode of the Culture Works podcast. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darcy. Thanks, everyone.